Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's webinar from SPEC Innovations, an overview of DoDAF with Innoslate. My name is Elizabeth Steiner, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Let's go over some quick housekeeping before we get started. During the presentation, feel free to send us questions, and we will get them answered in the question-answer part of the webinar. You can also interact with us on LinkedIn, through the Innoslate user group, or through Twitter using the handle @Innoslate. The webinar is being recorded and we'll make it available to you after the live presentation, so be sure to keep an eye out for it in your inbox. Now I would like to introduce you to our presenter, Dr. Steve Dam. He'll be sharing with you how to leverage the power of the DoDAF through Innoslate. Dr. Dam is the president and founder of SPEC Innovations, as well as one of our DoDAF training instructors. He's been involved with research, experiments, operations analysis, software development, systems engineering, and training for more than 40 years. Dr. Dam participated in the development of C4ISR Architecture Framework and DOD Architecture Framework. He has also received an Expert Systems Engineering Professional certification from INCOSE. He currently is applying systems engineering techniques to various DoD, DOE, and commercial projects. Feel free to send Dr. Dam any questions through the LinkedIn user group or send him an email. And now I'll hand over the controls to Dr. Dam and we'll get started.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So I'm going to kind of go at a reasonable pace here, I hope. I'm going to guess that we have a mixture of people with in-depth knowledge of DoDAF and people who are brand new to it. So I'll try to find some balance with doing that. So a little bit I'm going to start with, well, why is DoDAF even important to DOD? Is that really even still a question a lot of people are asking? And also then we're going to talk a little bit about how we can take a look at doing good systems engineering to meet the DoDAF requirements. And then finally we're going to talk a little bit about model-based system engineering tools and how they can specifically support DoDAF. Then we'll do a live demonstration of our Innoslate tool and give plenty of time for questions and answers. So why is DoDAF important to DoD? Well, first of all, what is it? And for those who don't know, it's a framework. It's designed to be a set of information that's collected about the system of systems or the mission or however you want to start, and working down for the capabilities that are needed through an operational point of view, viewpoint, to the services level, and finally to systems. And of course, services there, we're not talking about uniform services, we are talking about general services and like information technology services. If you notice that there are also viewpoints that run parallel to that decomposition that occurs. And the all viewpoint gives you some overarching picture of what's needed, it's the capturing of general information and the ontology particularly. Then the data information viewpoint talks about the data structures that are used actually at all these different levels. And then the standards viewpoint, which gives you, again, standards that could be put across any of these different areas. Finally, there's the project viewpoint. They added in project viewpoint in DoDAF 2, and that adds the whole idea of integrating the project side of the equation, not just the technical part of it. So that's a good addition that was made back when that came into being. So the thing is that a lot of people don't realize DoDAF was really developed as a means to compare our architectures. People were struggling with all these different architectures, and most time all they were getting is view graphs passed to them as an architecture, and somebody was trying to figure out, well, how do we distinguish between good and bad architectures, and how are they different? So the thought was come up with this framework to make that enable it. So again, focus on that comparison. And the idea originally was a set of products. Your system engineering result products would be created, and you'd show those, and they'd be in a common format. Version 1.5 and before really were all focused on 4 different views. They call them views at the time, not viewpoints. And then the operational, the technical standard side of it, again, it was called technical originally, and that caused people a lot of confusion. because it's really standards is what we were talking about. And it wasn't just technical standards, it could be operational standards too. Then the systems and services view was another level, and services was added in 1.5 to try to get service-oriented architecture kind of capabilities involved. And then, of course, the all view has been there since the beginning. In DoDAF version 2, they added a whole bunch of these other views. The capability view, of course, everything became capabilities-based was the approach that wanted to be taken. So that's more of a top-down kind of look at the problem. And so capabilities was an obvious one to add. The data information views were actually in other views previously. They were brought together in a more coherent way with this DIV viewpoint. And then the program view, of course, is added, and they separated services from systems. So again, those are it's kind of a quick thumbnail of the kinds of things that were captured. If you can see the specifics, and you can go to the documentation for this, and there's a lot of information about what these are. Let me just kind of hit some simple things for you as we walk through. The overview and summary is really your project plan for the architecture. What is it? What's the architecture for? What are you trying to do with it? The integrated dictionary, the AV2, is your repository, a data determinant. A lot of people treat that as a simple glossary. But if you really read the information that's being asked for there, it's really, if you're using a database tool, it's all the relationships between things too, and that's almost can only be captured in a database structure easily. So that's actually a much bigger one. The vision, you see, the vision is kind of a big picture, but not the OV1 equivalent, which you're used to, which is more of the cartoon level picture of it, more detail. This would be more of a very high level idea of what the capabilities you were looking for and how they might interact with each other. And then, of course, the capability taxonomy, some hierarchy of capabilities, and of course, a lot of systems, particularly if you're doing something more simple and applying this, that isn't very deep taxonomy. So don't expect that to be a big product necessarily. Capability phasing is the time phasing, dependencies. I think you can read most of these others. Mappings. We're going to talk about these more in general as we go through. So I think you get the kind of feeling for what's there. The DIVs are standard data models. Those of us have been doing data modeling for a year. They added the conceptual data model in 2.0, which was the thing that was missing, and grouped them together there. The operational views are pretty standard kinds of things. Again, the pretty picture, the high-level graphic, which is the one most people really want to see, but people keep trying to throw that out for some reason. I've never quite understood. That's important. The resource flow is more of a boxes and lines kind of diagram to show you that kind of information. And then, of course, your flow matrix, it gives you the information exchanges between things, and that's important. That's really kind of a high-level look at your operational interfaces between things. And then an org chart is OV4, and you start getting into some of the functional modeling kinds of activities, which are the OV5s and 6s. And recognize that there's different types of the OV6s that are there, and those don't have to all be done. Those are just 3 different ways to look at timing and sequencing. Project, again, they've added the project portfolio things. One of the things I thought was interesting missing was risk. There's no risk view, which would be an obvious thing for projects to be added. Services, if you look at the services and you look at the systems, you're going to see a parallelism in those. They're almost identical. There's some replication, and I'll hit that in a minute, between the kinds of things you're doing in the OVs and the kinds of things you're doing in the services and systems views. So I'll go into those in a little more detail in a minute. And then the standards, and there's just the 2 standards, profile and the forecast for standards. So again, simple set of things. They're fairly common. So it helps to understand a little bit of the history of DoDAF, so you understand, well, what are we doing? Why are we doing this again? Well, if you go back in time, architecture was kind of a deal, and kind of the first time we really heard the term used heavily in this industry was the IBM 360, which is back in 1964. That's even before my time in working. It's been around for quite a while. Probably one of the big changes was when IBM did a fairly major reorganization and reshaping of their focus towards services and away from the hardware side of the business, at least in terms of emphasis. And so they added this profession of information technology architect at the time. Well, about that same time period, we had new administration come in. They wanted to use commercial standards. They wanted to get rid of the MIL standards. So MIL Standard 499 was canceled officially in 1995, but it was basically being deprecated, gotten rid of before that even. But then people said, well, wait a minute, that's a pretty big vacuum. We used that for the basis of how we did system engineering in the department. So somebody said, well, let's come up with an architecture framework, because architecture is the thing. And so the C4ISR architecture framework essentially replaced it, but again, it wasn't an official standard. So it was adopted kind of hit and miss. There was a letter that went out from the Assistant Secretary of Defense for CQDI at the time, which mandated it to people in that domain. And so many people outside the domain said, well, that doesn't apply to us. It's not C4ISR. We do weapon systems, or we do sensor systems. So they didn't want to get involved with that. Well, as soon as that came out, people did what they always do when these things pop out. They had lots of comments. And I think they had to field like 1,000 comments that next year trying to figure out what to do. And I got involved with it then at the C4ISR Architecture Framework Panel 2.0. We were looking at building that version of the, again, I'm going to call it a standard because it certainly is what it's become effectively. So that was kind of an interesting experience for me personally, being on one of those kind of bodies, and learned a lot, and still learning a lot from it. It's interesting how it took a long time between that period and getting to the actual DoDAF version, because people kept saying, well, we really need to apply this across DOD. But there was a few things that got in between, like the Y2K crisis and 9/11 and those kinds of things. But it kept boiling. There was quite a bit of interest in pursuing this and making it DOD-wide. So finally, they came out with a version in 2003 that was pretty good. And again, it was pretty much mostly the C4ISR Architecture Framework 2.0, but updated and added a whole variety of ideas and things. 1.5 brought in the services, I think I mentioned, more service modeling kinds of things, and then 2.0 came out in 2009, and that was a pretty big change, because before we were always looking at pictures and thinking about pictures and diagrams and how things looked that way, and that got confusing to people because it was kind of beauty is the eye of the beholder. Well, there was a refocusing in 2.0 about the data, make it more data-centric, focus in on, well, what is the data, what is it doing, why is it important, making sure we're capturing what I'd call the essential elements of information. And so the data model was reworked from scratch, and that was a nice piece of work by my friends from Silver Bullet, particularly were the guys who led that work. And they did a great job of creating something dealing with all the different constituencies within the DoD. Before that, there was a CADM, a core architecture data model, that was part of the framework, and it was much more difficult. So again, a good hard look at the ontology. Still a little more complex to my liking than what I would have liked to have done, but again, they were dealing with trying to make everybody happy within the Department of Defense, and that's not a trivial exercise, as you can imagine. Well, there was a plan to continue on, and you notice this chart's from 2012 because it's the last chart I had in this area. But so there was lots of plans to hopefully do much more and keep pushing to something called Unified Architecture Framework. Well, the Unified Architecture Framework is under development. It has migrated to OMG, the Object Management Group, as a standards body that looks at those kinds of things. And so that is being worked on there, and I'm not sure when the plan is for a release on that, but I don't know if it's anytime in the near future. But that's going to try to bring together all these other views that came from all the other spin-offs of the DoDAF. The Ministry of Defense in Great Britain created the MODAF, and there's an equivalent in Australia and Canada, and I think NATO had one, and on and on. And even some internally, I think it was a Treasury and FAA, and everybody wanted to have their own kind of framework. So a lot of things trying to merge it, make it more homogeneous, and make it more useful across the board. And that's ongoing effort still. We're waiting for the final on that. But essentially, it's the same idea. It's a set of views trying to understand in models to look at different aspects of the problem. So again, why is it important? Well, DoDAF's in DOD policy. It's actually a critical element of the Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System, JCIDS. Now, JCIDS is how the department today comes up with the requirements for new systems. And so this is then obviously something very important, because one of the things DOD is buying all the time is new stuff. And it also even applies to old stuff. They're taking and looking at it, using it against that to be part of that. DoDAF is an integral part of this process, and it's in some key documents. The ICD that's there, if you're not familiar with it, is the initial capabilities document. It's not the interface configuration document. Okay, so it's a capabilities document. It's a very high-level document looking at what are the capabilities you're trying to develop. And then as you go down, the CDD and the CPD are ones that give you more detail. But again, there's part of that all the way. It's also part of the capabilities-based assessments. It's assumed that you will be doing DoDAF architecting there. Not everybody does, by the way, and they get away with it sometimes. But usually it comes back to haunt them, because they have to produce the ICD and the CDD, and sure enough, those require those products. So here's an example of that. I just pulled it out of the JCIDS manual. And yes, there's a JCIDS manual, in case you're wondering where a lot of things are. And this is just one example for the NetReady KPP, which is part of it. That's an aspect of it. So this just shows you some of the places where, as part of the ISICD, and the ISICD is a relatively new thing where it's for information systems, as a way to supposedly streamline things. They did that by accelerating actually some of the products that you have to deliver. Before, you just had to do the OV1 and for the ICD, and so now there's one to add more, and so that's been part of that effort as well. So this gives you an idea that it's pretty important, and it doesn't matter whether you're the sponsor, and you know, a lot of us contractors support the sponsor, or we support the program office, either one, and so sure enough, you know, we're involved in helping develop those things for a whole variety of things. If you want to get the JCIDS manual today, it's on IntelliLink. It used to be on a more open website, but they've put a number of these documents behind that firewall. So I hope you have your CAC card ready, because you're going to need it to get at some of these things today. By the way, of course, this list doesn't keep an organization from deciding that for their own internal processes, they want to add one. So many of them are, and in fact, if you look at note 2 in this diagram, HQDA requires SV10C, and Marine Corps requires an SV3, and so, you know, again, every organization has a little bit styling they do to this basic set of requirements. So, so the key is that you know, these requirements for the DoDAF products are continuing to change, but right now, if you don't do the DoDAF views, you're not going to get funding for anything major, and I say major system in quotes. I did one recently for a software tool that we did an ISICD for, and they wanted, I think, 7 or 8 products, DoDAF products in that view, we created those for them so that could get through that process. So obviously, DoDAF is something important to DoD. They're going to push that very hard, continue to push that very hard. So how do we do the good system engineering and meet the DoDAF requirements at the same time? So first of all, you have to realize that what are those DoDAF views really? They're really system engineering products. I mean, if you look at the behavioral, for example, I can take one of our action diagrams and produce a tremendous number of these behavioral products, not all of them. Structural diagrams, you're used to drawing the boxes and lines kind of interface diagrams. Those are available. Data models, we're all familiar with building IDEF 1X's or class diagrams and things like that. So data modeling is, again, a classic thing we do in systems engineering. And on and on. So you look at these things, you go, oh yeah, once you realize what they are and the commonality of the form, then you can focus on the substance. So you just use your system engineering techniques to produce them. So some of the techniques that are being used, let's face it, view graph engineering is still the #1. It's unfortunate, but I think it's really what most people are still doing. I see a lot of people using Visio, PowerPoint, and whatever to create these products. There's been a big push in the systems engineering community to do something called model-based systems engineering. So I'll explain that a little bit more in detail in a second. But that includes a whole variety of kinds of specific approaches. The most common popular one today, I believe, is SysML, is the one for the systems modeling language. I see that a lot. I see business process modeling notation. There's something called the lifecycle modeling language, which is the one we use heavily. That is really takes not only the early phase modeling, simulation kinds of techniques you need, but also adds in all the programmatic side of it, including risk and cost and decisions and all these other things. So it's a little broader and more capable of working across the entire life cycle. So as I mentioned, here's Nkosi's definition of the model-based systems engineering. Probably most of you are familiar with this. It's again a formalized application of modeling to support the life cycle. Is kind of a very simple way to say it. A lot of words to say that simple concept. So a lot of people have equated model-based system engineering to SysML, and that's partly Nkosi's fault for letting that happen. But really, model-based systems engineering essentially has been around for a long time. I mean, we were using IDEF before that as a technique. Anybody who learned flow charting in the 60s, then you would have used your flow charting template. So you know, it's been around for a long time. It's not a new idea. So one of the things that I saw at an international workshop a few years back now was a view graph that said MBSE equals systems engineering, and I think that was the idea to say, hey, model-based systems engineering in itself is not new. It's what's new about it is that you're using modern database tools to create and store the models, and that's the key factor that makes a big difference, because now they become more reusable. Now you can start getting into where you can evaluate them and do other things with those models. So the characteristics, I think, of a good model-based systems engineering tool, it needs to provide an ontology-based approach where you can capture the data so you understand what the data is, because it's all about the data. But also you want to visualize that to be able to express it so people can see it in many different ways, understand it, and have the models be interactive, not just drawings. One of the problems you get is, like, if you're just using Visio, Visio even has a database underneath it, but you know, accessing it and working with it and doing stuff with it means you have to do a lot of programming yourself, which is a lot of extra work, which, believe me, you'll pay 10, 20,000 times over the cost of a tool to mess around with that kind of thing. The other is you want to be able to get the visualizations from the data. I mean, the data should change the visualizations automatically. And again, a lot of tools don't. They just don't do that. Simulation, I think, is essential. Particularly, I've grown to really appreciate Monte Carlo. The reason is there's variance in all the numbers, all the parameters we have. If you're not really tracking that, that can make a big difference. And it's a good way, if you do Monte Carlo, to really get your hands around whether is the cost, schedule, performance risks. And that's really what you're trying to do. So you want to verify also that the models just work, though. I mean, let's face it, it's easy to set up one of these drawings that look really good but doesn't actually execute. And so if you're not testing it, not working with that, you're probably drawing things that are not correct. I almost guarantee you are. Another thing we found was document authoring and reviewing. Having an ability to do that within the tool is a very powerful capability that's essential to doing this. Because eventually what we'd really like to do is get to the point where people are interacting with the data directly through the tool, so that now you can understand the information that way and get out of the whole Microsoft Office side, except to finally publish it. And of course, you do have to have report creation from the database to do a final publication. But all through the rest of the process, and then through the rest of the life cycle, the database really should end up being your primary source of information. That's what we envision, and we think that's what the real essence of model-based systems engineering is meant to be. So how can model-based systems engineering tools specifically support DoDAF? Well, one of the things that's, first of all, you better have some easy way to access the DoDAF products. I mean, let's face it, a lot of your users, a lot of the people you're going to be interacting with just want to say, well, just show me your OV1, just show me your CV2, you know, show me what you've got. And if you don't have a quick way to get to it and show them exactly what they're looking for, it's kind of hard. So having a DoDAF dashboard, as I'm showing here, is very helpful. This lets you then access all the different products. I saw a very good example of that early on with the one of the IBM products. I forget which one. System Architect, that's what I'm thinking of. It had that kind of push button interface, and you could get to the different products very quickly and easily. And of course, it's important that there is some translation to the DM2. The DoDAF Meta Model 2.0 is the ontology. So there ought to be a way for you to at least get a feeling for what kinds of things you have there ontologically as well. And another thing, to be conforming to the DoDAF, according to the website, you have to have a physical exchange specification export capability. So you have to have the ability to put it out. And the reason for that is they're using that PES export with reading those with other tools. Particularly the joint staff is using their tools to look at this information and use it to help make assessments. So that's one of the reasons I think that's been put in. As I mentioned earlier, you know, having one diagram that automatically produces the many DoDAF products to me is important. I like working at this behavioral model level where I can interact with everything. For those who aren't familiar with our action diagram, the rectangles, rounded rectangles, are the individual actions, or again, you can think of them as system functions or operational activities or whatever you want to call them, tasks, I don't care. They're basically, fundamentally, we just call them actions to keep it simple. And then the parallelograms are the classic symbol for input-output data flow, right? That's your data flow. And then the hexagrams in purple, if you can see the purple there, basically those are resources. So this actually explicitly shows the resources being used as well, which turns out to be a very fundamental thing to have happen and be able to see visually. I don't know any other tool that actually gives you that piece of information on the diagram as well. Maybe somebody else does, but it's definitely here. The key is that this can be executed and it can be worked. We have a SysML version of this as well, an activity model that also can work with the simulators and execute. It's very, very effective. Also, then, you know, if you say, you know, I've gotten away with people taking the combined versions of those products for years. Let me go back one again. Down below, you notice I show it's a combined OV5B and OV6C. Okay, great. So some people might say, well, really, I want to see the OV5B, you know, or we want to see an OV6. Well, it turns out that, again, with Innoslate, we automatically generate those other products. So if you want to see the sequence diagram, which is your OV6C, here it is, just pops right up. You don't really have to do anything else. It's automatically created. It's all interactive. If you make changes here, it automatically updates the one on the action diagram immediately for you, and you can go back and forth very easily. And for the OV5B, we recommend primarily the IDEF 0. However, there's also an N-square chart, if you'd like to, which is kind of the equivalent as well. So again, those are two pretty common, well-known, capable. Again, all fully interactive. Click on any of them, and that information about it, the attributes and things, will show up on the sidebar. You can work with them and interact with it and engage. So this one particularly gets beat up by our academic customers. So the IDEF 0 is pretty good. I think it's probably one of the best ones out there. We certainly can at least do all the different IDEF 0 diagrams that are shown in Dennis Beatty's popular book on systems engineering. Of course, simulations I mentioned earlier. We have both discrete event and Monte Carlo capabilities, and they're fully interactive as well. Very rapid paced reports. Both can be output to Microsoft Project. We actually use this for our project planning as well. So we found that works extremely well for that. And again, for the project managers in the room, having that Monte Carlo really gets me that handle on that cost, schedule, performance, risk. Again, you notice cost is integrated value here with it, as well as your resources and your schedule. We have the Gantt chart kind of output on the discrete event, so you can kind of get a feeling for that. You also can see those outputs on the maxes and mins for the and the Monte Carlo. So there's a lot of capability to help you work with those, make sure you don't have the bottlenecks and other problems. By the way, for analysis and verification, we have other things in terms of modeling heuristics, checkers, and things like that, requirements, quality checkers. So there's even more than just what I'm showing you here. But this is more of what most people think in the classic DoDAF parlance. Of course, the physical model, you can have all kinds of different things. You can have the boxes and lines diagrams. Again, simple, easy to work with. Or you can put in pictures for things and add lightning bolts, ones and zeros, put a background, and now you're starting to get into that OV1 kind of view of it. But it's the same information, and you can, again, interact with them, work together with them, however you want to. And of course, we have a traceability diagram as well, lets you show how everything's connected to each other. So now this is a way to really tie together. This also enables a lot of the mapping that goes on. We have those mapping matrices as well. I'll talk about that in a second. And then, of course, here we have an AV1. So this is actually within the tool. This is in a documents view. It's one of our project plans. And this is the AV1 template that's from the DoDAF. And so we use that and give you that with fill-in things. There's some, I don't know if you can see the italicized in brackets information is the information that describes what should be in those sections. So again, all that's right there for you to make it easier for you to work with and do things. Then you just go in and add to those, type them, change out what you want to do to add that information. You can embed pictures from it within the tool. So again, here's a place where you can embed your views and bring them directly into your document if that's something you want to do for the report side of this. Particularly when you do the findings end of it, you could add in those specific documents, and so that would be a way to author all your products. I've done ICD, CDD, CPDs using the same approach in the templates that we have available in the tool. So again, all very helpful. Let you work with those. Again, link them to risks, link them to decisions, other information that you need, and it makes it much more interactive than trying to do this in Microsoft Word. There's a report button that you can go press, and that gets you to the Word output, and there's a report format for that. I mentioned before the matrices. Again, lots of matrices. You can see this whole list of different things that are matrices, and they're just mappings between different elements within the database. Again, they're thinking sort of in a flat way. We think in an entity relationship attribute way, so for us it's very easy to generate these from the actual data that's created. Most of these relationships, in fact, will automatically be developed for you within the tool, and so some of the stuff just comes automatically and is fast. Otherwise, you can change them by clicking in the boxes and X's and things like that. Again, fully interactive. If you click on like one of the capabilities, the sidebar will actually show the information about that capability, the description and other attributes that are associated with it. So that's kind of in a nutshell some things we thought were important to add to it. Again, you can look at other tools, see what they've done. We're always open for suggestion for that kind of thing. So if you see something, you say, well, gee, really, XYZ tool has this capability. Why don't you? You know, that's a great thing to add to our features request box we have on the dashboard. So now let me go and do a little bit of a live demo. And let's get that. Here's our main web page. So if you're signing in or sign up for free, we highly recommend you sign and try for free. There's a free trial capability that's set up for you to easily make it work with you. So let me jump in. I've got a Firesat example is the one I have that's best, and this is our DoDAF dashboard for that. You can see the kind of things that are here. So let me start with the all-view products. So here's your AV products, and so that's the overview and summary information. I already started one, so I can just click on that if I want to, and it'll take me right to that document. You can see how that works. I can embed different things, so if I want to start getting some finding results, I could add in a diagram. Make it an action diagram, and make it the design reference mission. That's always a good one. So there's the actual diagram. Now I can actually add a link to it, or I can add a caption. So I want to say figure 1, 8.1. 5B / OB6C. Voila. That shows up as a caption, and you can type in there and write other things, as you can see. So again, very interactive, very easy to work with, great place to start. When you're starting your project, you want to build this plan because this really tells you what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how much it's going to cost. So highly recommend you start here if you're DoDAFing. Then, as you get to the DoDAF dashboard, you can start building your other products. By the way, this gets automatically developed for you. So the AB2 product we have is the physical exchange specification export. You can do that way. To get a simple glossary, there's a number of ways to do that in the database. We can tell you how to do that offline if you'd like. Again, here's your DM2 statistics. We've translated from the ontology we use, which is lifecycle modeling language, to the DM2. So you can see the kinds of things that are relevant to what you're looking at for the DoDAF. And of course, as I mentioned, the feedback form, please use that anytime you want to give us good ideas about how you'd like to see. By the way, if you see a problem, though, make sure you contact our support immediately, because we're always looking at for what we call undocumented features. We'd like to get those fixed. We'd like to at least document them if they're good. And of course, then the capability views. Again, lots of different things here available. Capabilities taxonomy gives you an idea here. It's a taxonomy diagram. I click on any one of these. It has the information about it. And I could be adding descriptions. I'm being a little lazy. I should have descriptions for everything, right? Again, it's fully interactive, can be worked with, just moved around as you need to make it look nice and pretty, whatever you want it to do, within reason. It is a real diagram. It's not a drawing. So you know, as I actually change things, if I change things here, it changes it everywhere else. So that's an important factor. Let's go back to here, and notice we auto save all the time. So if you don't want to save something, you have to intentionally not save it. Some of the matrices, capability dependencies. I don't know if I've even got these set up. Not. I think I got a couple in here set up for this particular model. Give you the idea. But again, if I want to add ones, I just click in here and do that. It's that easy. And as I mentioned, your sidebar has the information for what you're doing. So I will not save that. I don't know, who knows what that will do to the thing. Now it brought me back to our dashboard here. So DIV products, I don't have any in this particular model, but again, those class diagrams principally. That's how those are set up at different levels of abstraction. OV1 picture, that's what we call an asset diagram. It's a physical diagram, so the assets here, and I've got the pictures, I've got the requisite lightning bolt, but notice the lightning bolt is actually a conduit. It has description, it has capacity, latency. These are actually used in the models and part of the actual verification and validation. So, what else we got here? Walk through a couple more and make sure then we have time for questions. Okay, yeah, getting close. Other OVs of interest. Again, I mentioned the reference mission here. If you just want to get a hierarchy diagram, we have that as well. So that's working. And again, fully interactive. Click on it. All the information about everything's here on the side. Work with that as you need to. What else we got that kind of might be interesting to you? Let's look at the 5B. I'm not a big IDEF guy, so this is not a complete IDEF model. It definitely has its issues. It's not a proper IDEF model, I'm sure. Many people would yell at me about that. You can check the model, and it will give you information about it. See what works, what the problems are. Here's that list of problems it ran into. Just tell me all the things I should have been doing. Doing 3 and 6 actions. Well, I have a lot more than 6 actions on it. You need to have a control. So these give you all the things you're supposed to do to do it, and of course you can just dismiss them if you're not interested, which I'm not. So. Let's see, and sequence diagram. That's what I wanted to show. Whoops, I had one. Okay, I don't have an event trace on that one. Okay, but anyway, so it gives you the ideas of things you can work with and work on as you go through analysis. Some of the project apply. Here's our project acquisition plan. So this would be an acquisition timeline. It shows you the different parts of the acquisition strategy coming in. So this just gives you different times or different phases of the life cycle. So services products, I don't think I put in any here, but they're all here for you to work with. I don't do a lot of service-oriented architecture anymore. Tend to do more cloud computing kinds of things. Your systems views are here as well. Your high-level operational concept, for example, a little bit more intense diagram. It does take a few seconds for the pictures to load, but they're here. loading it from the database and not stored locally. If you didn't notice, there's this button called Decompose, and you can just click on that and it'll show you what's below it. That actually gets me to another picture I have. So this is loading. And finally, the standards. And again, haven't put it in, but you could run a standards report, or you could get the timeline diagram as well. It's a very simple diagram. So again, I've kind of shown you the basic elements of it. All this can be interacted with and worked with the other pieces of information that are here. You can link in your requirements, and you can also even do things like our intelligence view, our test center, just lots of other features that you can link together and work with it. So it's not just that front-end architecture side of it. If you want to take it all the way through the life cycle, you can do that. So given that I've probably babbled on for long enough, let's see if we can take a few questions. Let me go back to the slides. And bring the slides back. Okay, let me just summarize real quickly here first before we do the questions. So practical DoDAF means that using MBSE techniques, processes, and tools to develop the DoDAF models. So if you do your good systems engineering, the DoDAF should just fall out for you. Use a common language. Again, some people try to use the DM2. To me, it's too complex to use natively. I'd much rather do what we do with lifecycle modeling language, which is much easier to understand and work with, and then it populates the DM2 products correctly. Apply the process that works for your situation. I use something called middle out, where I'm working from it more from an operational perspective, particularly at first. A lot of people are calling that mission engineering today. If that's mission engineering, then guess what? We've been doing that for 20 years, so it works very well. And of course, use comprehensive tools. You've got to have those to produce the products. It's just if I told you how many iterations for this little ISICD, you'd be shocked and disappointed how many iterations we had to go through with people in terms of changes. So having it in a database system will save you lots. Okay, so now we have time for the Q&A. Elizabeth, I see you're with us. How about tell us what the questions are?
All right, thanks, Dr. Dam. We've received a few questions already. If you have not done so, please send your questions to the panel on the right. Dr. Dam will answer as many questions as he can before our time is up. Our first question is, it's not clear which data entries produce which diagrams, or are they all produced from all entries?
So different aspects of the ontology will give you different diagrams. For example, if I'm doing an action, I would start with an action diagram. It populates it with actions. Then I connect things together, and those are IOs. Those are input-output entities. Then those are all part of that data flow. And I could do it from that diagram, or I could do it from the sequence diagram, and I can work with the same aspects of it. So I have the ability to I'm generating it from the data, the pictures. But the pictures can also help you generate the data. So it's a two-way street. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Our next question is it possible to run a discrete event simulator of the products view to model the time required to process the acquisition documents?
Oh yes, yeah. You certainly lay up the whole process for the management side of it, and that's again I use that for all my project planning now. I no longer use Microsoft Project at all. In fact, I'm on a Macintosh, so I don't have it even. And so we use it for that purpose, and we use it for cost estimating as well. And it actually completely replaces the project planning capabilities you need. And we've done fairly substantial projects using the tool to do that. So it's certainly feasible to do that.
Our next question is, to access the DoDAF products, is it necessary to navigate to the DoDAF dashboard, or can they be accessed directly from the database view once they've been created?
Yes, you can absolutely just go directly to the database view or diagrams view or whatever you want to use, and if they've already been identified as an OB5 and you know what it, or you know what an OB5 looks like, you can easily print that out and, or create a report for it and use that directly. Absolutely.
Our next question is, our military customer only allows operation activities from a prescribed set. So if we add an operational activity, can we provide a pick list of approved activities?
Oh, sure. In fact, what I've done is I've parsed often the lists. There are all kinds of different lists out there. In fact, there's a common operational activities list. I think I parsed that at one point and used those as a pick list for people to then choose from. And that could then be in your database available. And then you can share that with everybody and they can pick what they need to use and work with it. Absolutely.
Our next question is, our military customer only allows system functions from the Joint Common Systems function list. So in creating an SV4, the activity should only come from that list.
You bet.
Very similar question.
That's what you're going to do. Yeah, same thing. It's this exact same answer. Again, that's another one I think I parsed for somebody. I mean, parsed that recently for somebody. And again, a lot of those documents, unfortunately, a lot of these documents are not open documents, or they're FOUO documents, so we can't just post them or send them out to everybody. That's what I'd like to do. In fact, I'm kind of at some point want to encourage the DoD to do something like we're doing, where we have a share space where we capture documents that we create separately that are open and available, and then we put those up and make them available to people. I have talked to people at DTIC about this, and they expressed some interest in maybe doing that in the future.
We have another question about whether or not Innoslate is only available on the cloud.
Oh, no. Lots of different options for Innoslate delivery. The cloud version today is Google. However, we can operate on the Microsoft Azure cloud or Amazon. We're actually on Amazon and a variety of places, including the Amazon Gov Cloud. So there's those cloud options for you. There's a cloud capability from the Navy called NSERC. That's basically a Naval Systems Engineering Resource Center that has access to a variety of systems engineering tools, including Innoslate. And that can be at the NIPR and SIPR level. It's available. And then, of course, we're also on the IC Marketplace. So if you want it that way. And then if none of that works for you and you've got to have it behind your own firewall, our Innoslate Enterprise version gives you that capability. So again, you can have it wherever you want it.
Thank you, Dr. Dam. That's all the questions that we've received so far. We're going to go ahead and we're going to talk a little bit about some other DoDAF opportunities that we offer and some upcoming events. If you do have questions during this time, we'll try to get to your question after this. So first off, Dr. Dam is our lead DoDAF trainer. If you'd like to learn more about DoDAF, we offer 8 different DoDAF training courses. You can learn more by visiting our website, or you can contact us after this webinar. You can also purchase Dr. Dam's DoDAF book, DoDAF 2.0, a guide to applying integrated executable architectures. The book is available on Amazon, our Barnes & Nobles. We will also be having another webinar in September called Moving Past Spreadsheets with Modern Requirements Management. This will be September 12th at 2:30 p.m. We hope that you can join us. We did just get another question, so we're going to go ahead and answer that. Okay. Steve, if we develop an architecture for a radar system, for example, it may need interfaces with a command and control system developed in another Innoslate repository. How can we validate the interfaces between the two systems?
Sure. So first of all, you can map them with hyperlinks between the two different projects is one mechanism. However, what I'd recommend you do is we have a branching forking capability where you could merge the two projects into one, and then even you can do that doing that temporarily. so you can work with those and integrate them together directly. That's the way I would recommend do it. And then you either can pursue that, or that people can continue working their independent branches, and then they can be remerged later. So again, there's several different ways of making that work.
Thank you, Steve. That's all the questions that we've received so far. If you think of any questions after the webinar, again, please feel free to contact us either through email or LinkedIn. We're available. We would like to thank you again for joining us for today's webinar. As a reminder, we will be following up with you very soon to send you a link to the recording and the presentation slide deck. Again, just as a reminder, we are having our next webinar on September 12th. We also encourage you to visit our website and our blog, as well as connect with us on social media. That concludes today's presentation. Thank you again for your attendance, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. Please enjoy the rest of your day.